when I first decided to make the move to Colombo, my family and I, we were living in Bangalore actually. We've been living in India for many years. And I was having coffee with a colleague of mine in Bangalore, and I told him I was thinking of moving to Sri Lanka. And as we're sitting there, he pulled out a napkin and drew this little sketch I want to show you. And he said, "Pete, what the hell are you doing?" And I told him a story, and the story is actually sort of an inspiration for mine, and I think there's actually some real inspiration in it for us as a group too. This was a client of mine, a big Singapore bank. I'm not going to name names here to protect the innocent and the guilty. And this bank had they had a project that they had outsourced to a big services firm in Chennai. And it was originally supposed to be a one-year project. This firm in Chennai had 150 developers working on it for 12 months. And they got to the delivery date, and the software wasn't done. And they went to the client, this bank in Singapore, and basically said, "We're really sorry, it's not done. We need another 45 days. Now, of course, this triggered some pretty serious penalties in the contract. The bank, though, they were in a tight spot. They needed this software. So they said to the vendor, "Okay, you can have 45 more days." The vendor took 45 more days. They got the software done, but it didn't really work. It was complete, but unfortunately still huge defects in it. The vendor went back to the client and said, "We need another 45 days. But don't worry, we're bringing in our tiger team. They'll save us." Have you ever heard those words? Bringing in the tiger team. And this group of experts came in, took another 45 days, still couldn't get it working. Now the client was in a tight spot. They decided to cancel the contract. They were actually able to negotiate a full refund, essentially full refund from this vendor of all that they had paid. They shifted the project to an Agile services firm based in Bangalore. You're starting to see more and more of these here in Colombo and elsewhere. Firms that are in the services industry, but they're adopting Agile, and in fact they're using Agile to build from the ground up. Now this firm took a look at the code that the first vendor had provided, and basically said it would take us longer to fix this than to just start over. The client reluctantly agreed. They said, "Okay, we'll start over." Now, this new firm delivered the project successfully in 7 months. But they did it in 7 months with 9 developers. How is that possible? The first firm had 150 developers working on it for a total of 15 months and couldn't deliver. These 9 developers delivered it successfully in 7 months. Well, it wasn't Agile that did it. It was the developers. See, what's interesting, these 150 developers had an average of about 2 years of development experience. They'd never worked on a project in the banking domain before. These 9 developers had an average of 12 years of experience. And they've been working in the banking domain for the last 6 years. Now, what's interesting, the first firm, for these 150 people, their average blended billing rate for these 150 people was $10 US per hour. Now the second firm, their billing rate was $95 an hour. $95 an hour in Bangalore. That's pretty good, isn't it? So which was the more expensive project? Well, let's do a little math here. So the first vendor, they had 150 people, $10 an hour. They were billing 8 hours a day, 20 days a month, 12 months. That was the initial proposal. The second vendor, they had 9 people at $95 an hour for 7 months. So let's add all this up. The first firm was priced 3 times higher than the second one. And not only that, for the firms themselves, the profit margins were dramatically different. This is the really interesting thing about software. In software, skill beats scale. It's not about how big you are. It's about how good you are. So the question becomes, how do we become a skillful, agile organization and deliver the level of productivity and quality that enables us to set what price we choose, that enables us to escape from having to be the least expensive and charge what we're worth. So that's the topic of my talk today. 13 ingredients for skillful, agile organizations. Now, the first ingredient, I like to say, we got to start with the right why. Now, I want to show you an email I got recently. This was from a couple months ago. It came in, the subject line, I saw it in my inbox, it said, Agile adoption, can you help urgent? I love messages like that. I mean, I love helping people succeed with Agile. So I open it up and I look at it. Okay, I found your name by Googling good Agile trainers. My branding is working. We've been doing traditional waterfall, but we're starting a major contract from the US. The client requires Agile. Okay. Need help understanding Agile methodology and all relevant best practices, especially productivity metrics which client requires. Okay. Background, client is in Miami, team split between Pune and Hyderabad, testing outsourced to vendor in Vietnam. Okay. Project begins in 2 weeks, so full training must be completed. Send proposal immediately. Oh, God. This isn't going to work. This isn't going to work. Agile isn't simply methodology we learn, a set of rules that we follow, a process that comes in a spiral bound way. It's an entirely different way of working. At the time, actually, a different way of thinking. If we're embarking on this journey, we've got to really be clear with ourselves. What are we seeking to achieve? What are we seeking to accomplish? Agile's not a way of doing. It's actually a way of doing better. See, what the really interesting thing is, when you start using Agile practices, the very first thing that happens is you see everything that you're bad at. Agile becomes this tool for relentless self-improvement. Agile's not a series of procedures that we follow. It's a way of working that gives us visibility about what's really going on, what's really happening. What are we producing? What are we good at? What are we not good at? It starts with a focus on the practices, no question. What are the practices that I've found with the teams that I've worked with over the years make the biggest difference? It's really three things that form the foundation for all of the other things we're doing, that form the starting point for this shift in our mindsets. 3 practices. The first practice is this, cross-functional teams. Getting a team of people together who together as a group can build working software. Now, some people misunderstand this and they think cross-functional means we expect everyone on the team to be able to do everything. And let me say, if you have that, that's fantastic. Most teams I work with aren't like that. What we're trying to do is we're trying to grow what we call T-shaped people. T-shaped like the letter T. People with deep expertise in a particular area, a particular skill set, but over time, a breadth in other areas, other skill sets, so that they can work together effectively. Now, what's interesting is that when you put people with different skills together and have them work closely together, this happens naturally over time. But it begins by building a real team and getting them working as a team. The next practice is test-driven development. This is, a lot of people when they first hear this, they think, oh, this is a testing practice. This is not. This is a much more holistic development practice. For those of you not familiar with it, the way TDD works is, very first thing you do, you write an automated unit test. You write a test, and you run it. What should the test do when you first run it? Should fail, right? If the test passes, it's not a very good test. We run the test once to see it fail, and then we write just enough code to make the test pass. Now, once the test is passing, we look at the code and we say, can we make it any simpler? Can we remove any unnecessary duplication or complexity? We refactor. Then we write another test, and we run both tests together. Now, what should the first test still do? Of course, pass. The second test should fail. Then we write just enough code to make the second test pass while not making the first test fail. When both tests are passing, we refactor again. Repeat until the day you retire. This process allows us to build in very small increments, continuous testing, knowing at all times that what we're adding to the system doesn't break what already exists. It builds unit test automation into the fabric of our work style, and it also it ensures a continuous practices of refactoring, and it also frees us to refactor much more boldly because we know what we're breaking. Test-driven development. Most of the teams I've worked with in my career, once they've discovered TDD, they've made statements like, oh, I'm never going back to the old way. This is so much better. The third practice is continuous integration. Integrating continuously, not just once a sprint, constantly. So that what we're doing is we're finding our integration problems, and they're tiny, and we're catching them. I like to say software defects are a bit like lions. Have you ever seen a baby lion cub on TV? They're totally cute, right? You just want to pick it up and pet it and cuddle it. But give that lion cub about 6 months to grow up. What happens? You go and pet it and cuddle it, what's it gonna do? It's gonna bite your arm off. Software defects are just the same, aren't they? And one other thing, lions, when lions start to grow up, boy lion meets a girl lion, they fall in love, pretty soon you have baby lions. Defects do the same thing. They start to grow up, a boy defect meets a girl defect, they go on a few dates, pretty soon they're engaged, they get married, and many of them have their own baby defects, and sometimes the baby defects grow up to be much cleverer than even the parent defects. See, this is the problem. The longer you wait to test something, the bigger the problems you find. So one of the foundation practices is to change our approach to software quality, to build the quality in very small increments, rather than hoping to add it later. Because at the end of the day, working software, that's at the heart of Agile. Working software is what keeps us honest. You know, as developers, we're really good at telling ourselves these sort of sweet lies, right? What are some of the sweet lies we tell ourselves? Oh, it'll probably work. The performance will probably be good. We hope it's going to do the right thing. At the very center of Agile is this constant visibility of working software so that we know what's true. Does it work? Does it do the right thing? Here's another thing I say. For successful organizational Agile, brace yourself Ken Schwaber has this great quote. Ken is the creator of Scrum. He says, Scrum is a little bit like your mother-in-law. It's really good at pointing out everything you're not good at. One of the first things that happens when you start using these Agile practices is you realize all of the problems you have. It's like lifting up a rug and seeing all the dirt that's been swept under it over all the years. Now the bad news, of course, you see the dirt. The good news, once you've seen the dirt, you can start really cleaning it up. But be prepared. You know, it's a common experience for teams. They start using Scrum, for example. They start changing some of their underlying practices. And the first thing that happens is they see everything that's bad about what they've been doing. And the natural reaction is, Scrum is doing this to us. So one of the things you have to do is help your organization understand that this is not Agile causing these problems. This is Agile revealing these problems that have been there. See, here's the reality. If you're doing something wrong, if you keep doing it wrong, you'll keep getting the same wrong results. One of the things that comes to organizations that start to use Agile practices, first of all, with that visibility, is realizing just how much debt they have. Not monetary debt, of course, but technical debt. Debt in our practices. When we say technical debt, what we're talking about is it's aspects, characteristics of our system that are not good enough. Defects, for example, that are built into the system through corners that we cut at some previous point. And we all do this. We can't help but do this. We say, we'll fix it later. But see, the problem comes, like any form of debt, the more time passes, the bigger the debt gets. One of the first things teams see when they start using Agile methods like Scrum is just how much technical debt they have. And the question becomes, how much of our time do we spend paying down the debt versus building new functionality? It takes a lot of commitment to pay down that debt. The good news, though, is every bit of it that gets paid down immediately translates into better output going forward, immediately converts into better quality going forward. I like to say, when you're going to Agile, start with the desperate people, the people desperate for change. You know, many years ago, in my first Agile adoption at Yahoo, we actually rolled out Scrum with 4 teams. We actually picked 4 teams that were already in failure mode. Because the great thing is, if your team is already in failure mode, you've got nothing to lose. You're willing to try anything. And what's interesting too, you often find those teams show the most immediate improvement. All 4 of those teams got to the end of their first sprint and said, wow, Agile is hard, but it's already helping. And what was interesting, we rolled out Scrum for those first 4 teams, and then we sat back and waited. We waited for other teams to come to us, to raise their hand and say, we want to try Scrum too. Over the course of about 18 months, Agile at Yahoo grew from 4 teams to close to 200 teams worldwide, purely based on that word of mouth, seeing the results other teams are getting, and wanting to get those results for yourselves. I find that the most sustainable, the most robust Agile transformations come not from the top down, but from the inside out. Starting with the people who want to do it most. It's not just about getting more software sooner. I had a client of mine, they're based in Europe, and they transitioned from a traditional waterfall over to Scrum. And I talked to them about 6 months later, and I said, how's it going? And they said, oh, it's great. Instead of having to wait 6 months for a new release, we only have to wait 3 months. So we get the wrong thing much faster. See, the challenge, of course, with software is it's not simply about producing the software that works. It's about producing software that works and does the right thing. If it works but it doesn't do the right thing, it's as good as useless. So our challenge is figuring out how to not just use these practices to get more, better software sooner, to use these practices to more tightly connect with our customers, with our end users, so that what we're producing faster actually does what they need it to do. And it's not really even about software in the end. It's about an entire business. I had another one of my students, he reached out to me and he said, I'm thinking of learning about Agile and trying to introduce it. We have a big problem in our company. Our salespeople go out, they make these really unrealistic promises, and we need to be able to deliver much faster to meet their commitments. And I spoke to him about a year later and I said, so how's it going so far? He said, oh, it's great. We cut our delivery time in half. But there's just one problem. Now our salespeople are making even more unrealistic promises. It was interesting, his company over time, they experimented with this a little bit. In the end, you know what they found worked best? They actually changed their commission structure for the salespeople. Previously, the salespeople got paid their commission when the contract was signed. But now, their salespeople get paid when the project is successfully delivered. And I was talking to some of the managers from that company, and they said, it's really interesting. All of a sudden, our salespeople are out there putting a lot more work into finding clients whose projects we can actually deliver well, rather than just trying to get a signature for as many contracts as possible. It's very interesting, too, because the interactions between the sales team and the delivery team got much tighter. The salespeople suddenly became much more interested in what is it that we can actually do, and what would it take for us to do more, to do better. So what you quickly find is that as the practices in the IT organization start to improve, it starts to show more clearly some of the dysfunctions elsewhere in the business. So many organizations, the IT part of it is enough of a mess that it creates almost a shadow for all of our other dysfunctions. But as we start to work through the issues and perform better as an IT organization, suddenly we start to get a lot of visibility about where else is our business not performing. So at the end of the day, Agile is not about software. Agile is about business success. Use the right tools. There's so many tools out there, aren't there? I get asked this all the time. What's the best Agile tool? You know, Rally, version 1, Scrumworks, Mingle, Jira. It's just this endless list of tools and tools and tools. Let me tell you what my favorite Agile tool is. This. Funny experience, actually. A client of mine, this is a client of mine in Bangalore. Whenever I work with teams and get them started doing Scrum, we always use the paper on the wall. And this team had been doing Scrum for about 6 months. We got them started. They were using this traditional information radiator approach. And things were going great. They'd been doing Scrum for about 6 months, and things were just rocking and rolling. Now, their product owner was based in the US, in San Francisco. And after about 6 months, their product owner came to them and said, what about using an electronic Scrum tool? It'll give us all more visibility. We'll have all these great reports and analyses and charts, and you won't even ever have to stand up. You can stay seated on your backside for the entire day. And it's greener. He said, oh, okay. So they evaluated various tools. They picked one. They got it set up. They learned to use it. Now, I heard about this experience from them about a month and a half or so later. They said that the first sprint, when they were using an electronic Scrum tool, a few days into the sprint, one of the team members got a phone call from the product owner. Now it was in the morning Bangalore time. It was in the evening back in San Francisco, and the product owner sounded worried. The team member's name, well, I'll call him Sanjay. Sanjay picked up the phone and said, hello, and the product owner said, Sanjay, what happened yesterday? And Sanjay said, well, what do you mean? Is there a problem? And the product owner said, well, I was just looking at your individual burn down chart, and somebody said, my what? You mean the team burn down chart? And the project said, no, your individual burn down chart. And somebody said, I didn't know I had one. And the project said, quick, log on to the tool and I'll show you. It's on the management dashboard. So Sanjay logged onto the tool and the product owner said, now click on the views menu. Click views. So you go down to dashboards, click dashboards. Now go to management dashboard. Click on that. And it brought up a screen with a little burn down chart for each member of the team. And the product owner was right. Sanjay had not burned down any hours the day before. And the product owner said, so what happened yesterday? And Sanjay said, well, I was helping Vikram get the database set up. We spent all day on that. We finished it right at the end of the day. Wait a minute. It was Vikram that marked it as done. So he got all the burn down for it. I didn't get any burn down. And the product owner said, oh, interesting. You know, I was actually going to call Vikram right after this and congratulate him, because he burned down the most hours yesterday. They got off the phone, and apparently what Sanjay did next, he went to his teammates and he was like, hey, do you guys know about the individual burn down charts? And his teammates were like, you mean the team burn down chart in the tool? No, we have individual burn down charts. Here, let me show you. And you log in, I said, you click views, dashboards, now go down to management dashboard. And it brought up the screen, and apparently the whole team was kind of crowded around this monitor looking. Wow. Then one team member did this. Yes, I'm in the lead. And it's funny because when I spoke to this team later on, they all agreed this was the moment things changed. How do you think things changed for this team? Well, picture yourself. Come into work in the morning, what's the first thing you're going to look at? Your individual burn down chart. And what's the next thing you're going to look at? Everybody else's, right? Now, if your burn down chart looks good and everybody else's looks good, that's good. But if your burn down chart looks good and everybody else's looks bad, that's even better. And if somebody comes to you and says, oh, hey, you're the database guru. I really need some of your help. What thought might go through his head? What's it going to do to my burn down chart? What's it going to do to his burn down chart? Or you're trying to decide which task to work on next, and what are you going to pick? Are you going to pick the thing that really needs to be done next? Or are you going to find something that's easy to burn down? All of these things started to happen. They got to the end of that same sprint, and it was really interesting because they hadn't completely finished any of the stories they've been working on. And this was a surprise because in the previous 6 months, they got to the point where they could pretty reliably hit their goal. Not every sprint, of course, but most of the time they'd hit their goal or get very close. Now this sprint, though, they hadn't completely finished any of the items. They were all in states of partially done but not done. And there's a lot of finger pointing in the retrospective. And you know, apparently the big topic of discussion in the retrospective was some people are taking all of the easy to burn down tasks. It's not fair. We need to come up with a system to pre-assign all the tasks at the beginning so we ensure a fair allocation of easy to burn down tasks. Nice little bureaucracy we created. The next 2 sprints after went just as badly. And I got a call, this is when I got back involved, I got a call from the VP in this group, and he said, Pete, it's so weird. Scrum was working beautifully for about 6 months, and then all of a sudden, for no reason, Scrum stopped working. And when I hear those words, all of a sudden, for no reason, I'm like, okay. So I'm scheduled a visit. I came in. Now, when I came in, the first meeting I had was with the VP himself, and he sat me down and sort of updated me on what was going on. And during the conversation, he actually pulled up on his laptop the tool. He started showing me different reports. And one of the screens he pulled up was the individual burn down charts. And I looked at it, I was like, individual burn down charts? How how often do you check this? And the VP, he got a little defensive. He said, don't worry, maximum, just start of the day, end of the day. I was thinking, you're checking this twice a day? And he's like, you think that's bad? My boss is checking it like hourly. I can't get anything done because he keeps updating me on how many hours we burned down in the last 2 hours. When I sat down with the team, I was a little shocked. I mean, this had been a good team, really a team, and now it was like there was sort of like the cloud hanging over them. They weren't a team anymore. It was a group of people in a state of warfare with each other, essentially. What do you think my advice was to this VP on how to solve this problem? Well, what I wanted to say was, take your tool, walk over to the window, open the window, and throw the tool out of the window. The thing is, I knew if I said that, he wouldn't do it. See, the problem is, the senior management team of this company had gotten addicted to this tool. And it's, it's funny, we look at these VPs and CEOs, and we think their life is so easy, but it's not. I mean, they live in a continuous state of anxiety. Because they don't know what's really going on. Everything they know about what's going on comes from other people. And all of a sudden, they have a way of seeing what every single person is working on every minute of every day. What I do in this kind of a situation, I said to the VP, I said, we're not going to get rid of the tool. We're going to do an experiment. For 2 weeks, we're going to switch it off and go back to the paper on the wall. Just for 2 weeks, and let's see what happens. This is the real tool I'm talking about. The essential tool of Agile is this experimental mindset. You can create vastly greater change if you don't call it change, if you call it experiment. They tried it for 2 weeks, and things did get better, but not back to where they had been. It actually took that team a couple months to get back to where they had been, using the paper on the wall. I talked to the VP at a later point, and he made an interesting comment. He said, when the team came to me and told me about this tool, they said it would cost about $1,000 a year, but the amount of value, business value that we lost during those 2 months when we were using the tool, it's about $200,000 in business value. So the actual cost of the tool was $200,000 plus $1,000, plus my consulting fee. Resist the urge to tinker. I choose this word very carefully. Tinker. What does that mean? To attempt to repair or improve something in a casual or desultory way, often with no useful effect. You do see a lot of this. A lot of organizations, when they're starting to go Agile, the first thing they do is they say, we are going to improve Agile. We're going to be Agile about Agile. And you see some funny things. I actually, this was a couple of years ago, I got a call from a prospective client. They wanted some consulting help. And they said they've been doing Scrum for about a year. And I said, okay, how's it going so far? And he said, well, we've been doing 4-week sprints. And I said, okay, go on. He said, well, our first 4-week sprint, the requirements team did a requirements gathering sprint. And then they passed off to the architecture group, and they did a 4-week architecture sprint. And then they handed off to the development organization. They did 6 4-week coding sprints, and then they passed over to the testing team, and they did 3 one-month testing sprints. And I said to him, so how's that been working for you so far? And he said, Agile is not that much better than the waterfall. And I said, but you're still doing the waterfall. And he said, no, we stand in a circle once a day. We're Agile. Resist the urge to tinker. I see this again and again. The teams that get the best results start with basic practices, and they do the practices. They don't start customizing, tailoring. They don't start tinkering. They just do what other teams have done before them, found works. And as as they gain skill and confidence, then they build a foundation where they can start to improvise, where they can start to experiment. Start at the beginning. That's my advice. Change requires leaders. I love this picture here, because I think this captures the essence of the difference between traditional management and the servant leadership we're looking for in Agile. Two experiences of mine recently actually really stand out. There was a company I was doing some training and in Scrum, and the group had been doing Scrum for actually close to a year before they decided to get trained. And the practice they had was, at the end of every sprint, if the team hit their goal, the sprint would get labeled a successful sprint. And if they didn't hit their goal, regardless of what else they had produced, if they didn't hit their goal, it was labeled a failed sprint. And at the end of the sprint, if they had hit their goal, the company bought them lunch, Pizza Hut delivery. And if they didn't hit their goal, if it was a, quote, failed sprint, they didn't get Pizza Hut delivery. And at the end of the sprint, the VP of the group would actually send an email to the entire department, and at the top of the email he said, "Congratulations to the following teams who had successful sprints." And if your team hit its goal for the sprint, you'd be listed there. And at the bottom he says, "And unfortunately, the following teams had failed sprints." And if you didn't hit your goal, you'd be listed there. Now, you want to know something interesting? You know what the VP's big concern was about Scrum? He said, all of our teams are setting very low targets for themselves. Do you see any connection here? Now, I want to compare that to another company I was at. This was about a month ago. They were doing Scrum. At the end of each sprint, the upper management would sit in on the sprint review. And the first thing, the first question that we get asked in the sprint review is, "So, did you hit your goal?" And if the team said, "Yeah, we hit our goal," the management folks said, "Cool, good job." And if the team said, "No, we didn't hit our goal," the management folks present said, "Oh well, better luck next time." And management stepped out after the review. The team did their retrospective. But management, right at the end of their retrospective, management folks would come back and say, "Tell us one thing that we as management can do in the next sprint to help you succeed. Just give us one thing. That's all we want. One thing." It was fascinating. The difference, not just the practical difference, not just the difference in terms of the concrete results they were producing, but the entire culture of this organization was different. The team really felt empowered, not just empowered by the freedom that Agile can provide to us, not just empowered by the responsibility we get. You know, one of the funny things about true leadership is often it goes unrecognized. It's a quiet, very powerful thing that's going on. And the last thing on my list, see the big picture. You know, there's a statue. This is a 7th century bodhisattva. It was found just outside of Trinco. One of the most beautiful things our species has ever created. The subtlety, the lifelike expressions, the curve of her features, the life so clearly in this object. This was created 1,300 years ago here in Sri Lanka. And it still stands to this day as one of the most beautiful things ever created. And what's amazing to me, you think about that 1,300 years. 1,300 years of uninterrupted craftsmanship in this place. sculpture, architecture, painting, literature, music, textile. There is no place that has had a longer, richer tradition. Well, it's amazing, you think about that, 1,300 years. That's, how many generations is that? 1,300 years. 65 generations of craftsmen, craftswomen, creating beautiful things. I want you to look around you. Look, seriously, look around you in this room. I want everybody to look around. We're not sculpting out of stone, metal. We're sculpting out of bits and bytes. The things we're creating touch more lives in an afternoon than gazed upon that statue in the century. This is the picture. Thank you. I hope you have a great conference.